So, angels in the spirit realm, we've been talking about so we know there's a natural realm. So, I'm going to try to summarize 13 lessons in
Oh,
30 minutes.
nice.
So, so we know there's a natural realm and a spirit realm. So, the natural realm is where we live, the physical realm. We have sight, smell, taste, touch, and feeling. And it's also governed by time. And the spirit realm is where God, Jesus, Satan, the angels, the demons are, the spirit realm. And so one of the things we're talking about is how we kind of assume that everything that's talked about in the spirit realm, most people just assume it's an angel. If it's not God, Jesus, Satan, or a demon, then it's an angel. So the Bible says something about cherubim. People go, oh, well, that's an angel. Seraphim, oh, well, that's an
Mm-hmm.
angel. But it's like, nor said it was an angel. It's like, just like on earth, if, oh, that thing with four legs. Oh, it's a person. It's like, no, it's a cat. There's other stuff. There's
Mm-hmm.
other stuff other than just people. So we've been looking at also just how some things that we take are often taken literally should be taken figuratively, and some things that are taken figuratively, like in the book of Revelations or in the various, should be taken literally. We started off looking at angels. So we had 3 lessons on angels. So angel, in Hebrew is malak, in Greek is agelos, which means messenger. So angel means messenger. So angels are spirit beings, and we talked about one lesson about the nature of angels. We talked about how they have free will, things of that nature. Then we had a lesson on the roles of angels. They administer God's judgment. They are ministering spirits. They are serve and protect God's people. We talked about how angels are agents of God. So agency is a Hebrew legal term. Um, so where someone is considered an agent. So if someone can act as an agent for the other person, so that means that they're acting on behalf of the other person to the extent that, whatever actions that person's take, it's the person who sent them as an agent is responsible for it. So, if they break the law, then the person is responsible for it. So, for example, we talk about how, Herod killed the children under 2 years old, but he didn't actually
Mm-hmm.
go out to all the different towns and kill the people under 2 years old. He was people were acting as an agent to do it. So angels act as agents for God. And so examples we looked at in Sodom and Gomorrah, where God said, "I'm going to go down there and see, if what they say is true." But yet 2 angels went. God didn't go. And then the angel said, "We're going to destroy the city." They told Lot, "We're going to destroy the city." But then later the Bible says God destroyed it. So it's, the acts that angels do are often attributed to God because they're acting as agents for him. And so, like when God gave Moses the law, we looked at verses that say that the angels gave Moses the law. So it's an example of agency. And then we had a lesson on how we shouldn't pray or worship angels. Some people do that. That previously we looked at how previously angels were involved in getting our prayers up to God. There are verses in the Bible that talk about that. But now Jesus is our only mediator that we need to get between us and God. It's just Jesus. And so there's 2 types of angels. So Revelations 12:7-9 says the war broke out in heaven. Then war broke out in heaven. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon, and the dragon and his angels fought back. But he was not strong enough, and they lost their place in heaven. The great dragon was hurled down, that ancient serpent called the devil, or Satan, who leads the whole world astray. He was hurled down to earth, and his angels with him. There's good angels and there are bad angels. So angels, or we call them demons. So there's 2 types of angels. So then after angels, we talked about theophanies, which are, theo is like God. So seeing sightings of God on earth. So we looked at face-to-face encounters with God that people had, and encounters with God. So God appeared as fire. He appeared as clouds. But then we looked at also some face-to-face encounters that were had. So Moses, he had an encounter with the burning bush. So Moses, when he was up on the mountain, he had an encounter with God, the burning bush. So he saw God's true form. So God said, he would let him see his back, because he couldn't see, no one could see his face and live. So he saw his back, but he saw his true form, and his face was glowing afterward with the glory. Mm-hmm. Then we also looked at how when Jesus went up in the mountain and he was transfigured, it was kind of a similar description. So coming into the presence of God had that effect. And so we looked at how many encounters people had were on mountains. Like when people actually were face to face with God on mountains. So there's a term we discussed called going up the mountain of God. It means interacting with God directly. And then another face to face encounter, we looked at Jacob's ladder. How Jacob, he saw a vision of a ladder. The bottom was on earth, the top was in heaven. Angels were ascending and descending, and God was at the top of the ladder. And then we saw how Jesus told Nathanael in John 1:51 that, don't be surprised at this, you'll also see angels ascending and descending on the Son of Man. So basically, Jacob saw a ladder. Angels were ascending and descending, going from earth to heaven. So the ladder was the gateway between heaven and earth. The ladder was the means by which the angels could come to earth and travel back and forth. So Jesus was saying you'll see angels and descending on the Son of Man. So basically saying on him. So again, showing that Jesus is our gateway to a face-to-face encounter with God. And then we looked at the angel of the Lord, which is mentioned quite a few times in the Old Testament, and tried to determine what is this angel of the Lord. Is it God? Is it Jesus? Is it an angel? What is this angel of the Lord? And it appeared to Moses. The angel of the Lord talked to Hagar, talked to Abraham, talked to Jacob, talked to Joseph, interacted with David, talked to Gideon. So it was all throughout the Old Testament, the angel of the Lord. And many times it spoke on behalf of God, saying God said this and said that. But there are other times when it spoke about God in third person. And then it also talked about how the angel of the Lord went before the Jews when they were in the wilderness, coming out of Egypt. And then we read 1 Corinthians 10:1-4. Paul says, "For I do not want you to be ignorant of the fact, brothers and sisters, that our ancestors were all under the cloud, and they all passed through the sea. They were all baptized into Moses in the cloud and in the sea. They all ate the same spiritual food and drank the same spiritual drink, for they drank from the spiritual rock that accompanied them." So the spiritual rock that accompanied them in the wilderness. He says, and that rock was Christ. So we see that we saw through the lesson that the angel of the Lord was a pre-incarnate appearance of Jesus. So before coming in the virgin birth. And so we saw that, God had a plan to fellowship with man, and that's why he created the garden. And then Adam and Eve sinned and broke that fellowship. But then he put together another plan. He chose a family from which he could restore that fellowship through the seed. And Jesus was a part of that plan. But Jesus' part in that plan didn't start with the birth of Mary. It started long before that. So Jesus was part of the plan from the beginning. So that was the angel of the Lord lesson. And then we looked also at throughout this, we looked at the temple and the tabernacle, because the temple and the tabernacle were meant to be reflections of what's actually in heaven. So we use them to help us understand some of the descriptions we see in Revelations or in other places. There are often clues in the tabernacle or the temple to let us know what those things actually were. So for example, in the tabernacle you had the outer court, you had the inner court, then you had the Holy of Holies, which was, so you had the place with the lampstand, the showbread, and there's a veil, an altar, and there's a veil separating the Holy of Holies where the Ark of the Covenant was, and only the priest could go in. And so we looked at the lampstand, or the menorah, was 7 lamps. And the lampstand, so a lampstand doesn't produce any light. You know, a lampstand holds lamps that have the light. And so we saw in the book of Revelations that it says the lampstands were the church in the book of Revelations, and that the 7 spirits of God were the lamps. And so when we did our study on the 7 spirits of God, we saw that the 7 spirits of God mentioned in Revelations were the Holy Spirit. And in Revelations 1:4-5, it says, and so I'm saying, you know, these in like 3 minutes, but it was a whole lesson to come to the conclusion. But John 1:4-5 says, John, to the 7 churches of the province of Asia, grace and peace be to you from he who is, and who was, and who is to come, which is God. It says, and from the 7 spirits before his throne, which is the Holy Spirit, and from Jesus Christ, who is the faithful witness, the firstborn from the dead, and the ruler of the kings of the earth. Let's see. And then, if we look at the Holy of Holies, we see that represented God's throne room. So the Holy of Holies in the tabernacle represented God's throne room, which, you know, in Revelations and Ezekiel, they talk about the throne room where God was. So that was represented in the Holy of Holies in the tabernacle, because that was where God would come. So he made a place that resembled where he lived, and so he could come to earth and see it. And so we saw in the ark there were 2 cherubim, and God would come down in between the cherubim. And in Solomon's temple, there were 2 larger cherubim placed behind the ark. So there were 4 cherubim around God's throne. And in the book of Revelation, we saw that there were 4 living creatures around God's throne. And so we concluded that those were that, and other reason that those were cherubim. So each of them one had a face of a man, one had an eagle, one the face of an ox, and one the face of a lion. Then we looked at Ezekiel's vision, and in Ezekiel's vision he saw cherubim, and each cherubim had a face of a man, a lion, an ox, and an eagle. And beside each cherubim there was a wheel within a wheel. He talked about the wheel within a wheel, which are referred to as Ophanim. And there was fire going between the cherubim. There was a platform above the cherubim, and there was a throne on the platform. And the likeness of a man, or God, was on the throne. And so we saw how that is described as the chariot of God, because either the cherubim had their wings spread out, and they were touching each other. So basically one on the north, east side, so basically forming a square. Each of them had wheels next to them. There was a platform above them, and then there was a throne on top. And there's a verse that talks about how God came out of the temple and went above the cherubim, and then the cherubim went to the other gate, and then God was above the cherubim, so he moved with them. And so basically we saw how this was referred to as a chariot in which God rides. And then we also looked at the description of Elijah when he was taken up to heaven in a whirlwind, and saw how the description of what happened there was this pretty much the same scenario as Ezekiel's describing, and it mentioned him going up in a chariot as well. So that we saw that those were linked, and this likely the same type of chariot. It's kind of a lot to go over briefly.
I'm still with you.
Yeah. But let's see. So then we talked about seraphim. So both cherubim and seraphim are beings that protect God's throne. So they're known as throne guardians. And we saw the singular form of seraphim is seraph, which means snake. And so in the wilderness, the Israelites, black-necked cobras came and attacked them. And the word for black-necked cobra is seraph. It's the same word. S-E-R-A-P-H. Or some say S-E-R-A-F. But yeah, S-E-R-A-P-H. And so Isaiah had a vision of seraphim with wings, and it's the same as the word seraph, which are black-necked cobras. And God told Moses to put a seraph on a pole to cure those who'd gotten bitten. And so Moses put a brass snake on the pole. So God told him to put a seraph on the pole, and he put up a brass snake. So meaning that Moses understood a seraph to be a snake, a brass snake. And so therefore seraphim are snakes with wings. And we saw that they're often, sometimes they have hands and feet, and sometimes have a face of a man. And then we looked at some of the drawings from the ancient times of seraphim, and saw that an iconography of the times, and saw that they were depicted as snakes, and sometimes with wings and legs. And we saw that if you have a snake and you give it legs and you give it wings, it also looks like a dragon.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
The one on Shrek.
Oh, Shrek.
That's what I pictured in my head. The one, the dragon of Shrek.
Lord of the Rings.
Oh.
Yeah. And then the last lesson was on the serpent. So looking at Satan. And so we saw it like in the verse I read earlier, Revelation, Satan was described as a snake and as a dragon. And in the garden he was defined as a snake, so he was likely a seraphim. But there we saw there's also a verse that describes him as a cherub, so it's not quite conclusive. But we saw that Satan fell because of his pride, and he wanted to take the place of God. And then he wanted to be like God. And then when he tricked man, he told Eve that if she ate the fruit, she would be like God. And so we see that that's a trick that Satan often uses, is telling us that we can take the place of God. So, then we asked ourselves, or tricked her by telling her that God is keeping something from her, or we wonder, is God, if we don't accept God's rules, are we taking the place of God? Or sometimes we want to do things in our own way, and not or we think that, these rules, don't apply now or something, and then it's kind of a similar tactic to what was used in Adam and Eve. And so that was the summary of the last 10.
Oh, wow.
10.
You did 10 already?
Or not 10, 13.
No, you
Yeah, so let's see. So for those who were there, anything of any of the lessons stand out to, or most interest any of you guys, or stand out most from the series?
I was going to say the dragon thing, but we already...
Oh, the dragon?
So,
I like most about the learning about the cherubim.
The cherubim.
Yeah, that was.
Yeah, we had 3 lessons.
Yeah, that was a whole lot. Even when it came down to Elijah going up in the world, we talked about briefly how he was the only one. Well, one of the few that went to heaven alive.
Yeah.
He didn't die. And how the chariot came down, and grabbed him, and Elisha, right, was just standing there. So that was interesting. And then I think the last one with the seraphim and the snake and Adam and Eve. We talked about that. That was really interesting to me.
Yeah, that's the one that was interesting to me. Is how it is compared to the dragons, and how we see dragons not being good in movies and stuff.
Yeah.
So men that produce these movies, they must know a little bit of the Bible, I think the movies that you see in Hollywood, a lot of have stuff
Well,
from
actually,
there.
a lot of them are based on the Bible and based on Jewish culture.
Mhm.
I mean, because even if you look at like some of the science fiction things, so like Star Trek, a lot
So
of
you
that is
think
themed
you
off.
think how they come up with all this, but no, there is a lot in there,
A lot
and
a
that
lot of
book
it's
has been for
purposely.
thousands of years.
Yeah, because even like the Star Trek, the Live Long and Prosper, this is a Jewish. So this is a Jewish letter. I forgot what it's called, but this in the synagogue, they give a greeting like this to live long and prosper. It's the Jewish greeting, and then the priest holds his hand up with this symbol.
And filters into public, like, culture. Well, U.S. like culture anyway, but whatever. Yeah.
You ever get a chance to go to the De Young Museum?
Oh, I haven't been that one.
They have cherubim right outside,
Oh,
a few statues that are right out in front of it. It's really interesting.
I mean, one of the things we talked about is how, because cherubim, so we saw in cherubim, they had a face of a man, a lion, an ox, and an eagle, and so sometimes they would interchange. Maybe it'd have a body of one and the face of the others. And so we looked at, okay, if it had a body of the lion and the face of a man and the wings of an eagle, which was a common description of it, then what would that look like? The Sphinx of Giza, that would kind of, they had cherubim in those times guarding the thrones of kings. The kings would put cherubim out front, and then so that was a similar thing, like the Sphinx and the Great Pyramids.
That makes a lot of sense with the head of a man. With the head of a man, yeah.
Yep.
So that's the full headdress.
Yeah.
It just made me think more a little bit too about like the whole thing they're saying, like why sphinxes are perfect but their noses are knocked off. But that's a whole nother.
Yeah, that's a whole different
Yeah.
Alexander the Great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, that's debatable.
That's why
Whether,
Brian doesn't let me come here for all
oh, that's
That's why I don't let you come
Well-
here. Not let you
well,
come
some
here.
people say he was just doing it for target practice. Then others say it was intentional. They had one that had a nose, and then in the
It
London
lost.
Museum, yeah, they did, but it lost. It broke.
It
It
broke.
got broke.
Well, one of them got broken during World War II, right? I
Yeah.
think.
Well, the
Like,
Sphinx,
yeah.
the
yeah.
one on the Sphinx, yeah.
Oh, you're talking one in the museum?
One in the museum, yeah.
Oh.
It just happened. The nose got broke too.
Just happened to, yes.
Well, people, because the nose was a African American nose.
You'll
Just
never
the
know.
nose? Just the nose? Oh, I mean,
I don't know. I guess a little. Well,
The
they
eye
have,
too, girl.
yeah. I mean, there are some pictures, but yeah. Yeah, I guess we'll never know.
I just made that connection as you were made the connection of the sphinx and the cherubim.
Yeah. So we have quite a few connections with the pyramid during the lesson. Oh, another thing which I missed is that so we talked about the face of the lion, the ox, man, the eagle, and so around the throne, the cherubim had them, but then also in the tabernacle, there were 12 tribes. They were split up into three. One group of three on the north, one in the east, southwest, and each group of three had a standard or a banner. And Judah on the east had a lion on a scarlet background. Ephraim had on the west had a black ox with a gold background. Reuben had a man on a gold background, and Dan had an eagle on a blue background. So basically surrounding the tabernacle was a lion, an ox, a man, and an eagle. So it was similar to around the throne.
I didn't make that connection.
That also kind of, that north, east, west, south, right? That was also the wheels that were in between the
Yeah.
wheels, right?
Mm.
And it kind of also kind of tapped into some of how the astrological signs. I think
Oh,
we kind of
yeah.
talked about that
Oh,
a
yeah, we
little bit.
talked about
Yeah, just the way that the wheels were kind of positioned.
Okay.
Well, the lion, the ox, the man, and the eagle.
Yeah.
So the eagle was Dan, and it was also a snake, or I guess Dan. So on the standard for the side was an eagle, but I guess the tribal or each tribe had its
Yeah.
own flag, so
Mhm.
that
And
was
the
a
tribe of
snake.
Dan. Okay.
Was a snake, which
Mhm.
is also seen as a scorpion. So some people say that, you know, in the vision, the man, the lion, the ox, and the eagle represented. The lion was Leo, the ox was Taurus, the man was Aquarius, and the snake, scorpion, was Scorpio. So it was meaning it represented the astrological signs. That was one of the.
Yeah, it got pretty deep for a while.
I have a question.
Yes.
So I'm kind of a simple mind, you know that. But I'm thinking, I mean, so it sounds like the study is very, it's almost like a study of a history, almost a little bit, right? How it is, almost like it. So okay, my question is, in this time where you dove so deep into this study, like, how have you made it relevant to your everyday spiritual life? Like, I'm sure something happened. I'm curious about that because you went so deep into that. Like, I'm curious what part of that like spoke to your now spiritual life, which is.
What was the one where we took home where you were to pay attention to like the signs, the things that happen right in front of you that you don't really pay attention to? Like there's certain hidden messages, not that exactly is what it was saying, but things happen in front of you and you don't really pay attention to
the
them.
wheel. So when we talked about, so we had a whole lesson on the wheels.
Yeah,
in
because the wheel
Ezekiel's
had many
vision.
Brian
eyes.
told me.
So the wheels.
Yeah.
That was the one that Eric came to, the
Yeah.
other Eric. And so,
Yeah.
but I went to, so usually I'll kind of present kind of my conclusion from my studies. But in studying, there's like a lot, like these are kind of a lot of debatable topics. So there's a lot of different, so for the wheels, the Ophanim, I kind of presented all the different opinions on it. So that's how like the Zodiac one came out and the other one. And so I presented like all of the different opinions on it. And one of them was talking about how the wheel within the wheel, when they said Western culture, we look at that and we're trying to, and the thing we think about is, what does it look like?
Mm-hmm.
What does that look like, a wheel within a wheel? They said, but in other cultures, they think about, okay, well, what is the function of that?
Mm-hmm.
And so the message given to that was that it was cycles. And so how God teaches us in cycles of life. So a wheel within a wheel. So example given is like if you're walking down the street and you pass a tree, and you look at it, oh, that's a nice tree, and you keep walking. And so in the Western culture, once it's out of our sight, it's out of our mind, and we don't think about it. But so as you keep walking, God will put that same tree back. And it's like now you see it the next time, and you go, oh, that tree has, interesting bark. And then it's like every time you see it, you'll notice something different about it. And so it's like when Moses in the burning bush, so he saw the burning bush, but he stopped and he went over to the bush, and that's when God spoke to him. So it's like if he went out of his way to take notice of the signs that God was giving him. So we have to go out of our way and take notice of the signs because God teaches us in cycles. So if we have a lesson to learn, if it's something that we haven't learned, we'll get the test. If we fail the test, then we'll get the test again. And so that's how God teaches us in cycles. It's like you'll keep getting the same test until you pass it. So God teaches us in cycles. And so that was one.
It is almost like an experience we go through in life.
Mm-hmm.
And or either we learn from there or we just continue on, right?
Yeah.
Having the same problems and we don't know
Yeah.
why.
Right, we have the same problems and we know why.
Or we don't, we don't want to
just-
see it.
And we'll keep experiencing it again until we finally pass the test. And God,
Are you finally? I didn't know you're that hard-headed.
yeah, we are at least,
Yep.
taking tests many times. It's like, then after you fail it, you're like, I should have just again. Not again.
I think Yama Von Zonta said some stuff that made sense to me too, because sometimes I just try to do too much. And she's like, yeah, don't forget, sometimes you can just pass that test with a C. You don't need an A.
Oh.
She's like, just get it done.
Doesn't have to be pretty. Oh yeah, and so the lesson of Jacob. So when Jacob wrestled with God, so he was a trickster, and he wrestled with God, and then God broke, he wrestled with the angel of the Lord, which we discovered, or the angel. So then we talked about all the different thoughts of who he wrestled with. There was like 5 or 6 different. But so he wrestled, he got his hip broken, and then so Jacob, when he tricked to get Esau's blessing, his father asked him, who are you? He said, oh, I'm Esau. And he asked him 3 times, who are you? And Esau. So he got the blessing, but he never could enjoy it. He had to flee. He's running for his life because he got blessed in Esau's name.
Mm-hmm.
But then when he wrestled with the angel asked him, who are you? And he said, I'm Jacob. And he said, okay, I'm going to change your name to Israel. So it's like sometimes if we get things and we don't get them in our own name, in our own identity, then we don't really get to enjoy it. If you get some ill-gotten gains or you get something out of trickery or deceit, then you don't really get the blessing that you would have gotten if you had got it in the way God's given. So Jacob struggled. He was tricky. He had tricks and everything. But when he finally decided, he was gonna wrestle with God. So basically, he was fighting with God and say, "I'm not gonna stop. I'm not gonna stop until I get my blessing." He wanted his blessing from God. But basically, instead of before he turned to his tricks, but now he turned to and said, "I'm just gonna go to God for it." And so, it may seem like wrong. He's like, telling God, "Hey, I'm not gonna." God told him to stop, and he's like, "No, no." But the thing is he was dependent on God for it. So it's like before, I know how to trick my way into this. I know how to get it this way. But now he's like, "Oh no, I'm just gonna trust God for it. I'm not gonna pursue any of these other ways. I know how to get it my own. I'm only gonna chase after God." And once he did that, then God blessed him. So that was a lesson from there. So.
I'm just in awe about everything,
Yeah, I like the time. I can't believe you spent so much time doing it.
I've been reading the Bible from the beginning, right? And then every time I came to the class, we saw things that I just been reading about.
Wow.
Yeah,
It's amazing.
Yeah, it was nice.
That is amazing.
Correlation, yes.
That is awesome.
Yeah, so I definitely learned a lot during the series. Like my view on a lot of the stuff was different before I started the series, like who was Angel of the Lord and what were the 4 living creatures. So studying for it, I got a different view. Even like whether we should pray to angels, because I've been reading all this stuff, kind of thinking, oh, maybe it's okay, And then we're studying out, going, wait a minute, this is New Age stuff, or this is Kabbalah
Brian
stuff,
and I
or
were
this
just
is
talking about that.
Yeah.
And it's like then getting deeper into it. Okay, where does this come from? So it's like on the surface it looks okay, but then if you get deeper and deeper into it, it's like, okay, where is the actual source of this? And that's the trouble with a lot of stuff. Is like a lot of things, they present you something that's new. Oh, this is, it's kind of the same as Satan's like, no, God was keeping this from you, or your religion is keeping this information from you. Your religion, your Bible, they're not showing you this. And you go, yeah, but then, if you get like really deep into it, you find out, oh, wait a minute, that's coming from a whole different source than where I want it to be. It was like, yeah, that one thing is true, but that doesn't mean all of this other stuff they're saying. It's like how does the Jehovah Witness they get you? They tell you something. This really was Jehovah. They changed it to Lord. You look at it, oh, that's true. But then it's like when they tell you all this other stuff, it's like you assume that okay, because the first thing was true, then you just accept all the rest of it.
That's my biggest problem with religion all the time is the manipulation behind that. And Brian and I were just talking about that. I was like, because I think one theme is whether or not like you are really into the Bible all the way or not, is like it's just very clear that you shouldn't pray to another God. And it's very clear that God's image should really not be like played with, messed with, or anything like that. But I find like a lot of religions, whether they're like, except for Jewish and Muslim people, there's a lot of stuff going on where people do that. Like they have lots of artistic things of what God should look like. They pray to other saints. They pray to angels. They have little crucifixes of something. And I just like I talked to Brian about that a lot. It's like I think in the Bible it keeps saying, but all these religions branch off of that. So then is it like you were saying? Like New Age, kind of like they tell you one thing.
Yeah. Well,
Well, and something I didn't think of until just now, I didn't think of that conversation. Like every time an angel appears to somebody, they're like, who are you? And they like start to worship it. The angel like, no, don't do that. They're like, oh yeah, right, don't do that.
Right. Yeah. That's what we talked about in that lesson.
Yeah, okay.
If it's an angel from God.
Right.
But that's the other. That was the other thing we talked about. There's two types of angels. So you could be praying to an angel, or you could have an angel appear to you. But Satan has his angels too. It's like if you you may be talking to an angel, and you may get an angel to respond. You may get an angel to do something, but that doesn't mean that.
But if it is from God, yeah, He'll tell you
They'll
not
tell
to
you,
worship
don't
him.
do that. Right.
Right. But if it's like it's not gonna say. You pray to an angel, it's not going to come out and say, hey, I'm a demon. It's gonna do what you're expected to do, so you'll keep on, so initially it'll react the way you think it should react, to pull you in. All right.
Well, I watch all these things on History Channel about God Decoded and all these programs about, I'm just curious. But I'm going with the mind. I'm determined there is only one God. He's alive and He's done a lot for me. I just want to see what men got to say. Because man is looking for answers.
Yeah.
And that's why they digging. And they end up digging in the Bible. And they end up saying, for some reason, this agrees with the Bible.
Yeah.
So I'm just curious to see. But yeah, man is trying to do all this to get us away from God.
Yeah, well, that's kind of one of the reasons I wanted to do this, because people kind of have a hunger to understand what's going on. They realize there's something in the spiritual realm, and they want to learn it, but they go to church, and you can't really find out about the spiritual realm. The pastor's not talking about it, so it's like, okay, well, I can go to these psychics or these witchcraft or these New Age people are talking about the spirit realm, so it's like that satisfies their hunger to learn about it. So people are like, I want to learn about the spirit realm, but I go to church and they aren't talking about the spirit realm. They mention Satan every now and then, but it's not really, satisfying my, hunger for knowledge about
When
it.
you said that about the angels, you made me experience when I was working at NASA, and there's kind of chain letter going on, and it's kind of like a chain letter, like, oh, we kind of keep it on the hush, like we're not supposed to be doing this at work, but I think you would be a person that would be interested, kind of thing, because I think you believe in God, kind of thing. And so my boss ended up giving it to me, and it was this thing on how, like, on a certain day, you need to light a candle in your window and say something about, like, some prayer about some angel, but something about Jesus Christ is in there, so it's supposed to make it kind of somewhat cool. But you do this for so many days, and you invite them in your house, and then you blow your candle out, and then you give this to someone else, and then you're supposed to invite them into their house. And my boss is Indian. And I just feel like I could keep it real with y'all, because, like, y'all know me. I was just like, look, Garish, yeah, I believe in Jesus Christ and I go to church, but I'm black too, and we don't play with spirits. So, I don't know about very much from the South. I appreciate it. You can pass this on to somebody else.
It sounds creepy.
I'm not lighting no candle for nothing to come in my house. Open a window. No.
It sounds
that sounds
creepy.
too real.
Invite in what?
Yeah.
Get a little letter.
But actually, talk about how Jewish and Muslims do. So the Jews, that's kind of the history of the Bible, is the Jews were turning to other religions. But so a lot of what they turned to got incorporated into modern day Judaism. So for example, the menorahs, the candles were never part of Judaism or Christianity. Back in the Bible times, they had lamps. There was oil. The menorah, the miracle of the menorah was that the oil that was only supposed to last one day lasted 7. There were no candles. So the candles came from non-Jewish, non-Christian religions, and those, because the wax and stuff isn't a Christian origin. That's from other pagan religions. and that they've kind of incorporated that. But anyway, but yeah, a lot of the
Well, I just meant in the sense of like them not saying, saying Yahweh and saying like not saying the Lord's name and just being very protective of that.
Yeah.
And in the Muslim
Yeah.
culture, like even today, there's like current strife with like remember that big thing in Sweden because they supposedly drew a picture of what Muhammad was supposed to look like, and to them that's like total blasphemy.
but that's Muhammad.
Well, I'm just saying, but to them,
But
and
it's
like
this-
out of all religions, I feel like
Yeah.
those are the ones that try to keep like that's like forbidden, that's taboo. You don't do that.
Mm.
And I was just saying, there's so many other branches of Christianity and other religions where it kind of gets a little gray areas.
Right.
So like
Yeah.
certain people are like, no, you can't do that. But then some people are like, well, we pray to Saint Anthony or whoever the guy
Mary.
when you lose something.
Pretty
Yeah.
Mary.
Or Mary, but I'm just saying, so that's what I'm saying, where you light a
Yeah.
candle with this saint's name on it. So I was just comparing that where the other
Yeah,
cultures,
yeah,
they're like,
yeah.
no, like we're gonna like you
Yeah.
can't be drawn our God.
Well, that
know,
was
like-
yeah,
So
that was part of why the inspiration for the. So we had a whole lesson on praying to angels. Part of it came from that book. So like some Catholics pray to angels.
Mhm.
Very specific angles
Yeah.
for certain things.
Or even people that were alive and then died, right?
Yeah,
Saints.
yeah,
Yeah.
Okay.
They call them
so-
saints. Yeah, and I told one of my Catholic friends that he's like, oh no, we don't pray to angels. We don't pray to angels. I'm like, do you pray to Saint Gabriel? Yeah, they pray to Saint Michael. It's like those are angels, right?
They didn't know. They don't know.
Like,
They don't
he's
know.
like, oh, but that's different because they're saints. I'm like, how did this angel become a saint versus the other? It's like,
Name was mentioned somewhere.
yeah, but it's like.
But yeah.
You look up what are the qualifications for a saint. It's like, well, yeah, ain't that Michael and Gabriel fit that, but so do all. Well, I guess those all need names. Well, they have 4 names actually.
Oh.
Catholics.
Religion.
Yeah.
And it's more like a
Raphael.
tradition because their families were Catholic, so they continue to be, but they don't know anything
Yeah.
That's
about
why I
it.
say religion, because they're doing stuff,
Yeah.
people stuff, and they're not doing what the Bible says, right? And
Yeah.
now they're in power and they want to
Yeah.
keep this. I'm